Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Josh, and just over 3 years ago, this was me. This was about an hour after my ACL reconstruction, and while I had a lot of fun filming this video, and it's actually turned out to be one of the biggest videos on the channel, there was a horrible lingering question in the back of my mind: will I be able to play sport again? And that was something that I really wanted to do. I was 23 years old, I was coming to the peak of my athletic ability, and it all came crashing down in the summer of 2017. It's pre-season, we've all been working really hard for the last 2-3 months, and the season is due to start in 2 weeks. We're at the end of a sprint session, and we're playing a very simple, no contact game of touch. I dummy, I break the line, I'm through, but play gets called back. I stop, and then bang. That felt unnatural. I hear a pop, and I'm on the ground. That pop is my season over. That pop was a full tear of my ACL. Strangely though, after 5-10 minutes on the ground, I was able to walk off the pitch under my own weight and drive myself home. It felt wrong, but it didn't stop me from going about my day-to-day life. That's the strange thing with ACLs. After 2-3 weeks, if you start kind of rehabbing your legs, strengthening your quads and hammies, you can carry on. There's even examples of professional rugby players, let alone other athletes, returning to sport without having surgery on their knee. But generally speaking these days, if you're involved in high-level sport that involves cutting, pivoting, turning, it's highly recommended you have surgery. So that's the position I was in. I didn't know if I'd done my ACL. I was looking back at the time, but I knew it felt really wrong, and I heard a pop. And I knew from friends, if it was my ACL, that was me done for the whole season. No running, no contact, no sport for at least 9 months. And I was one of the lucky ones, and that still turned out to be the case. There's 3 main ways you can tear your ACL. The first one, and the one that I did, is called non-contact. No one's around you, no one pushes you out of line. Effectively, your knee just gives away underneath you. If you imagine your knee like this is your tibia, your shin bone, this is your femur, your thigh bone. Your ACL acts as a rope between these two and stops your tibia from moving underneath your femur. In a non-contact injury, that's exactly what happens. It generally happens due to fatigue or muscle imbalances, weaknesses in your quad or hammies, and your tibia just moves from underneath your femur and then snaps your ACL. In this case, you will hear a pop, and that has a drastic psychological effect on recovery, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. The second main way of tearing your ACL is through indirect contact. So this is typified normally by a player going up in the air, being knocked while they're in the air and landing on the leg awkwardly. Generally speaking, someone goes up for a shot or a catch or a header, they're knocked while in the air and they're shifted from their pre-planned movement pattern. So they land on their leg horribly and their knee gives way. Think Ibrahimovic, that's exactly what he did. It also happens quite a lot in basketball because they're constantly in the air and some of these blokes' limbs are extra long. Interestingly, there was a study published in 2015 by Marcus Walden et al. That found that of the players that they studied, up to 85% of their ACL tears happened as a result of non-contact or indirect contact, which is an amazing stat really, to think that we typically think that ACL injuries happen because someone hits the knee, and generally speaking, it's nothing to do with that. Just as a side note, every study that I cite, we'll leave a link to in my description so you can go do your own reading. But that brings me on to the third main way of tearing your ACL, and I think typically this is what people think of when they think about an ACL tear: taking a shoulder, a boot straight to the knee, pushing it into the wrong direction and tearing your ACL that way. Now this happens a lot more in contact sports, so NFL, particularly guards, when they're kind of all in a ruck together. If someone falls on the outside of someone's leg and pushes their knee, that can tear an ACL. That's quite common in NFL, I'm led to believe. Also in rugby, around rucks, when everyone's clearing each other out, if someone lands on your knee, particularly the size of some of these blokes, if they land on your knee wrong, that can tear your ACL clean. For me, as I say, it was non-contact. I was through, I turned, my knee gave way underneath me. The strange thing about it is I didn't remember feeling any pain. I can't remember screaming. I remember being like, ah, but it was more that felt wrong as opposed to, ow, that's really painful. 2 hours later, of course, my knee did swell up, but at the time, there wasn't really a great deal of pain. And that's typical of these types of injuries. Normally, if you see it on kind of a live sport event, someone's lying on the floor, hands on their head, but not screaming, not like a leg break where they're really in pain. It's more, wow, something just went wrong in my knee. But I say again, I was very lucky. I didn't injure anything else other than the ACL. I think if you injure your cartilage or your meniscus or maybe do the other ligaments, it might be a bit more painful. If you've been through it, let me know in the comments, because I've heard it can be more painful than my experience. Another thing that I got really lucky with was I was covered for private healthcare through my dad's job up until the age of 24. I was like 23 and a half, so it was a really good time to get seriously injured. But fortunate enough to live in the UK, where I still would have got the operation free on the NHS, but I probably would have had to wait, like kind of judging by some of my teammates, maybe 6 to 12 months, whereas I was operated on 2 weeks after my injury. So really, really fortunate in that respect. Another advantage of that is I had an allograft as opposed to an autograft. So an allograft is when your new tendon is made from the flesh of a donut. I don't know how to do this bit sensitively. In America, they say cadaver. In the UK, they'd say dead person. I don't know, donor. I just don't know how to do this sensitively. The advantages of having an allograft is that when you have an autograft, they take fibers from your patella tendon that joins your patella to your tibia, which helps with leg extension, or your hamstring tendons. And the effect of that is, if you have your patella harvested, it can make your quad strength, it can make it harder to get that back after your surgery, similar with the hamstring and glutes if they take your hamstring tendon. The surgeon said to me at the time, if you were Usain Bolt, which I'm not, I would recommend having an allograft, because obviously the recovery is quicker because you're not messing with any of your other tendons. They don't have to cut into you. So I opted with that. I learned all of this at my pre-appointment surgery, which is also where I figured out what the stakes were. My surgeon at this point gave me a lot of information about the return to sports and how many athletes return to the same level of sport they were at prior to the operation. And he said some don't. This for me was one of the hardest points of the process, to actually hear that. I was 23 years old and I was being told that some people don't return to sport because of this injury. He said there would not only be physical barriers, but psychological barriers, which got me thinking, no, they won't. As soon as my body's ready, I'm gonna wanna play rugby. As soon as I'm physically fit, I'm gonna play. As it turned out, of course, he knew more about this than I did. So there I was, 23 years old, sat in a consulting room thinking, I might not return to sport. But then came the positives. Surgery went really well. My physio started immediately and I left the hospital under my own weight. 2 weeks after my surgery, I had my first physio appointment and he said he hadn't seen an ACL in this good nick in 25 years of being a physio. A massive weight was lifted. We spoke about my prehab and he said that would have helped no end. And one of the recurring comments from all the physios that I saw, they get frustrated that people think pre-op physio is pointless. Particularly people find who have a long wait before their surgery, they think, why do I want to strengthen my legs to have surgery and not be able to do anything for a few months? But strengthening the legs and keeping good mechanics is so important. Particularly if you've got a 6-month wait before your operation and you have to kind of still walk around. You have no ACL stabilizing your knee, so you can further damage your meniscus or cartilage or other ligaments if you don't do any pre-op rehab. So there was a study published in 2014 that looked at 2 groups of patients. The first group went through an intensive 5-week pre-op rehab course and the second group went through the usual care methods. The group that went through the rehab course showed significantly better CUS than the group that didn't. CUS is knee injury and osteoarthritis score. Clinically relevant differences, which I'm told is 10 points or more, in 4 subscales: CUS pain, activities of daily living, sports, and quality of life. But not only pre-op, the group that went through the course showed superior patient outcomes 2 years post-op than the group that went through the normal care methods. I didn't do too much pre-op because, as I say, my surgery was so soon after my injury, but if you do have a long layoff, get to work. It is not a waste of time and you will see no end of benefit from getting in and doing pre-op rehab. So my next session, my physio mentioned to me that the most common age for males to injure their ACL was between 19 and 25, which made me feel a lot better because I fit right into that bracket. I thought, okay, it's pretty common then. For females, it's between 14 and 18. He also showed me images of professional athletes that had come back to sport, and I'm going to list some of those off to try and help you with your mental, because thinking that you're always going to be weaker is a massive problem with this injury. So, Quade Cooper, who had an ACL reconstruction and remained one of the best steppers in international rugby. Alex Morgan, Adrian Peterson, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Being shown all of these elite athletes who returned to sport at the level they were at prior to their operation really got me in the right headspace. So I dug into the literature and I found a study from the British Journal of Medicine 2018 which showed that 83% of elite level athletes get back to the level they were at prior to their operation. 83% was good enough for me, so I got to work.
Day 5. While these exercises are getting easier, they are still as tedious and boring. However, I was reading last night and one source said that it takes 60 knee bends before blood starts circulating through ligaments, so perhaps the 500 per set isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. I'm a happy bunny this morning. Check this out. I don't want to get cocky, but oh god, I'm so happy over those baby steps, it's unreal. But yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself before I see the physio, but yeah, it looks like carrying cups of teas might be soon back on the menu. I am under order of the physio to attempt to walk like this, and hopefully when he says you feel ready to go onto this, I think I'm ready now, but I don't want to push it because, well, I've got a long road ahead.
So here we go, my first squat, my first climb up a mountain. Then 8 months after my surgery, my first rugby game at the same level I was at before. I even bagged myself a try. Then came more. I was back to kicking. I was back to kicking on a flooded pitch. And as a bonus, here is me on my first ski holiday last year, which my surgeon was cringing at the thought of. And despite binning it a few times because of my lack of skill, my knee felt absolutely solid. So here I am over 3 years later, trying to convince as many people as possible that a return to sport is a realistic goal, but there are some barriers you're gonna have to get across. Firstly, the psychological barrier that my surgeon told me about. At the time I thought, nah. As soon as I'm physically fit, I'm gonna want to return to sport. I remember saying to people, there's not gonna be a barrier for me. 9 months, I'm gonna be playing again. The reality is, I could have played before my first game back, and the season after my first game back, I could have played more, but the fear of re-injury is real. And I think that extends to general injury. Of course, you're thinking, my knee gave way once, it could give way again, so in your day-to-day, you become slightly more risk averse. Do I wanna jump down from that wall? Do I wanna jump over that fence? And when you're playing sport, whatever it may be, you probably play a little bit more gingerly on the leg. But I'm told if you survive a year post-op, your new ACL is 5% more likely to tear than your contralateral leg, your non-injured leg, and at the 2-year mark, they're exactly the same. So if you trust your non-injured leg, you should trust your new ACL. But you start thinking about general injuries as well and think, do I want any other injury that's gonna put me out for that amount of time? Yes, you can't play sport for 9 to 12 months, but I couldn't drive for 3 months after my operation. My endurance was literally void. They deemed my leg too weak to press the clutch down. Of course it wasn't, but it's just an example of how it affects your day-to-day. And I think the fear of any other injury actually contributes to the amount of people that don't return to sport. It's not so much that they think my ACL is going to give way, they think, do I want to risk having another injury that's going to change my life in the way these do? That being said, if you do want to return to sport, you can. Now I'm going to throw all the cliches at you here. If you treat this like a bump in the road, an opportunity to assess your weaknesses, rebuild and come back stronger, you can do it. If you get yourself in the right headspace and work hard on the physio, gone are the days when an ACL injury is career ending. You can get back to where you were, you got this. Now, I really hope that helps you. I remember when I was told you're not doing anything for 9 months, it was quite a blow, particularly as a sports person. You think, this isn't a nice place to be. But being shown athletes that had come back and being shown studies that show the return to sport rates really helped me. So if you've just picked up an injury or you're waiting for your operation, or even if you're supporting someone through the process, I really hope this video makes you feel a little bit better. If you've got any questions, feel free to hit me up on Instagram or the comments or email me and I'll try and help where I can. I will see you all next time. Peace. And if any of you want to watch the operation process, you can go watch that. If you want to see me kick some rugby balls post-operation, you can go watch that. And if you want to see some bad skiing, go watch that. You got this. I'll see you next time. Peace.